Hello and welcome to AB Recaps. Today we will show you the 2001 anime show Monster. It promises to be exciting, so take a seat back, unwind, and yes, there are spoilers ahead. The anime begins with Dr. Kenzo Tenma, head of neurosurgery at Eisler Memorial Hospital in Düsseldorf, performing 6-hour surgery on an opera singer. When the surgery finishes successfully, the co-surgeons wonder aloud about Dr. Tenma's exceptional medical skills. The next morning, Dr. Tenma is awakened by his fiancée, Eva Heinemann, who shows him a TV news report about her father, the hospital's director, Ludo Heinemann, getting credit for the surgery Dr. Tenma had performed last night. She appreciates Dr. Tenma's skills, but he is a little saddened by the fact that Heinemann has taken the whole credit. However, Dr. Tenma is grateful to him for giving his career success. The next day, a colleague, Dr. Becker, shares banter with Dr. Tenma and talks about hospital politics, subtly indicating that Heinemann is exploiting Dr. Tenma for his own reasons. Dr. Tenma tries not to take him seriously until he is encountered by a Turkish woman who grabs him by the collar for not treating her late husband, who was rushed to the hospital before the opera singer. He remembers that he was going to perform surgery on the Turkish man, but Heinemann's ordered him to perform surgery on the opera singer instead. He talks about this with Eva on a date, who believes people's lives are not equal. Dr. Tenma sits numb after hearing this because it is contrary to what he believes. At night, police arrive at the Liebert's home to find Mr. and Mrs. Liebert's bodies, along with the body of their adopted son Johann, who is still breathing and has a bullet wound to his skull. Johann's twin sister Anna is standing beside his body, but is in severe shock with post-amnesic effects. The twins are rushed to the hospital, and Dr. Tenma is called to perform surgery on Johann. Dr. Tenma first sees Anna, who is mumbling the words "kill him." Then he prepared to perform on Johann. He thinks removing the bullet from his head is going to be really critical, and this is what only he can do at the hospital. But he is interrupted by the chief of surgery, Dr. Oppenheim, who asks him to perform surgery on the mayor, who has promised to give funds to the hospital. He refuses to do so and insists Dr. Boyer handle the mayor's case, but Heinemann on the phone says his word. Going against orders, Dr. Tenma listens to his conscience and decides to save Johann. He performs surgery on Johann, and it turns out to be successful. Unfortunately, the mayor dies, and Dr. Oppenheim and Dr. Boyer put the whole blame on Dr. Tenma, saying he backed off at the last minute. Dr. Tenma meets with Heinemann at a business gathering and apologizes for what happened. Heinemann appears nonchalant, which calms Dr. Tenma down. However, he soon learns that Heinemann has demoted him from the position of head of neurosurgery and chosen Dr. Boyer as the new head. Not only that, Heinemann cancels his research work, and Eva breaks up with him. Disappointed, Dr. Tenma laments in the hospital, sitting beside Johann, and says that Heinemann is better off dead. Later, Egon Weisbach, the detective, makes a visit to Anna, who has forgotten her past owing to the post-amnesic effect. Dr. Tenma strictly orders the hospital staff not to let the twins meet until their full recovery. To win over the public and draw attention to the hospital, Heinemann instructs Drs. Boyer and Oppenheim to take a picture of the twins together. When Dr. Tenma learns about the Photoshop scheme and that Anna has collapsed as a result of it, he gets mad at Dr. Boyer, who defends himself by saying that Dr. Tenma has been dismissed, as Johann's Dr. Parapon. A helpless Dr. Tenma goes on a night-long binge, while Heinemann eats a piece of candy that the public has donated to the twins. He offers them to Drs. Oppenheim and Boyer, who eat them in a snap. Thereafter, the three of them are found dead in their respective locations. The police arrive at Dr. Tenma's home to inform him of the murders, so he rushes to the hospital, where he learns that the twins had disappeared. After attending Heinemann's funeral, he is encountered by Egon and Inspector Lunge from BKA, who inform him of the cause of the deaths: candies laced with a muscle relaxant. Inspector Lunge seems suspicious of Dr. Tenma, but the case gets closed because of a lack of evidence. Meanwhile, Dr. Tenma was directly promoted to the position of chief of surgery. Eva tries to patch up with him, but he turns her down. 9 years later, Dr. Tenma becomes a highly successful and skilled surgeon, handling difficult cases while also training other surgeons. Elsewhere, a lockpicker, Adolf Junkers, is hit by a car while running in fear, and Dr. Tenma is called up to treat him. That's when he runs into Inspector Lunge, who is still suspicious of Dr. Tenma for the past murders, given how much success Dr. Tenma has reached only after the murders. Anyway, Lunge suspects Junkers of being involved in the serial killings of wealthy couples. Therefore, he wants Dr. Tenma to treat him well. When Junkers opens his eyes after the operation, he mumbles in terror that the monster is coming. Then Lunge questions him about the homicide of the old couple and asks who hired him. At this point, Junkers begins to shiver with dread. At this, Dr. Thnak requests that Lunge leave the room. Then he takes Junkers outside to get some fresh air and has a heart-to-heart with him. Junkers is so moved by Dr. Thmak's influential personality that he decides to confess his crimes late at night. Junkers walks out of his room to find the guard officer dead. He is startled by the sight of this and runs in panic. Dr. Thnak arrives at the spot and uncovers a candy wrapper beside the dead guard. He follows Junkers to a construction site, where he runs into Johann Liebert, the child he operated on 9 years ago. Johann is revealed to be the mastermind behind all serial killings, and he nonchalantly murders Junkers before revealing that his real name is not Johann. He adds that he owes his life to Dr. Thnak, and that he murdered Heinemann and his employees when he heard Thnak yelling that they were better off dead. Then he walks right past Dr. Thnak, leaving him fearful that Johann has no compassion for humanity. Dr. Thnak tells the entire story to Inspector Lunge, who becomes suspicious of him. Cut to Nina Fortner, a bright student at Heidelberg University studying law. However, she has recently been having strange dreams and collapses in class after hearing a case about a family homicide. After that, she starts receiving poetic emails from a stranger, along with a rendezvous invitation. She is ecstatic about it and decides to meet the person behind the emails. However, she is approached by a random dude and collapses when she sees Johann standing behind the dude. Meanwhile, Dr. Thnak embarks on a mission to learn more about Johann's past and meets a blind man who tells him about a boy named Franz who once told him that Dr. Thnak saved his life. The boy was odd because he was fascinated by war stories and the fear they evoked. He informed the blind man that he would be picking up his twin sister from Heidelberg on their 20th birthday. Meanwhile, the Fortners prepare to tell Nina that she is adopted, while Nina accepts another rendezvous offer from the email sender and travels to Heidelberg Castle. With the help of Moore, a newspaper journalist, Dr. Thnak manages to track down Nina's house. In the process, Dr. Thnak strikes up a friendship with Moore. They travel to Nina's house, where they meet with the Fortners, with Miss Fortner holding a cake. They tell them that Nina is in danger, and they learn Nina's whereabouts, prompting Dr. Thnak to rush to Heidelberg Castle, while Moore stays at the Fortners to call the police. Dr. Thnak rescues Nina from Johann's hired thug and departs after tying him with his necktie. On the way home, he tells Nina that her name is Anna Liebert, but she doesn't remember her life before 10. Soon, they return home only to find the Fortners and Moore dead. This triggers Nina's memories, and she reveals that she shot Johann when he murdered everyone who was nice to them, namely the Lieberts. Dr. Thnak tries to call the police, but finds that the phone is dead. Soon after, 2 detectives arrive, claiming to have received a phone call and escorting the 2 away. But Dr. Thnak becomes suspicious because the phone was dead. He and Nina meticulously escape and make a quick stop at a hut. Then Dr. Thnak goes to town, where he discovers that the hired thug is dead and that the detectives were real. When he returns, there is no one in the hut except for a letter left by Nina, who intends to handle her matters by herself. Meanwhile, Lunge discovers Dr. Thmak's necktie at the murder scene. It leads him to Eva, now a 3-time divorcee and binge drinker. She denies ever giving this tie to anyone, prompting Lunge to leave. Eva later tries to reconcile with Dr. Thnak. When he shuts her down again, she threatens to turn him to the cops by revealing that she gave him the tie. A desperate Eva then reveals the truth to Inspector Lunge, causing Dr. Thnak to flee the police. He soon discovers that he is a suspect, not only in the murder of the hired thug, but also in the murder of an elderly couple in Verdun. In the next 5 months, Dr. Thnak lays low and gets firearm training from a retired Army veteran, Hugo Bernhard. Here he also gets acquainted with an icy orphan girl, whose mother was accidentally shot dead by Hugo and is now in his care. During this period, Dr. Thnak gets well trained along with making a bond with the girl and Hugo. 5 months later, Hugo is inquired about by Lunge, but he refuses to reveal Dr. Thmak's whereabouts. Thnak investigates the Sprinter estate, owned by the murdered councilman and his wife in Verdun, where he meets a dim-witted robber named Otto Heckel. He recognizes Dr. Thnak from the news and offers him the chance to make a lot of money by treating underworld thugs, but he declines. However, when Heckel bribes him, saying that he will reveal the location of the councilman's murderer in return for accepting his offer, Thnak appears to relent. He visits the murderer, who is remorseful and feels he is being duped by a man named Enrich into killing the councilman. But before revealing any more, he shoots himself. Heckel then causes Thnak to be abducted by 2 terrorists, one of whom is injured. Despite being threatened with a gun, Thnak refuses to treat him because of his moral rules. However, when the terrorist appears to be guilty, Thnak treats him, and he later surrenders to the police thanks to Thmak's halo. Thnak then travels to East Germany, where he learns that Johann was raised in an orphanage named 500 511 Kinderheim before being adopted by the Lieberts. He goes to meet with a former ministry district official, Hartman, who reveals that 511 was a horrible place for a child to be in, full of fear and terror. Their conversation is cut short by the arrival of Dieter, an orphan in Hartman's care. Dieter appears to be cold and icy child, but when Thnak asks him about his goals, he responds by saying, "A soccer ball." After having a nice dinner with them, Thnak leaves the house. While walking down the street, he sees a soccer ball and buys it, returning back to Hartman's house to give it to Dieter. On the other hand, Hartman beats Dieter, and when Thnak returns, he finds Dieter bruised. He yells at Hartman and rushes Dieter to the hospital. On his way, he assures Dieter that, contrary to what Hartman has instilled in his mind, the future is bright and beautiful. He abandons Dieter in facility care and pays a visit to Elma Theis, the director of another orphanage. She seems to be a caring lady and happens to know Anna. She reveals that 511 was a research facility for East Germans where they deprived children of human emotions in order to raise them as soldiers. But the 50 instructors and all the orphans, except Johan, were killed in a fire. Thnak returns to the hospital, learns that Hartman has abducted Dieter, and rushes to find him, eventually arriving at the abandoned 511 Kinderheim. Here he sees Dieter sitting on a throne with Hartman standing beside him, who explains that Johan set fire and was raised to be a monster, and only General Wolf knows his origin. He reveals that he wishes Dieter could be like Johan, but to his surprise, Dieter declines and goes to Thnak, who threatens to shoot Hartman if he makes any move. Seeing Dieter go away, Hartman starts to cry like a fool, finding himself a failure in making Dieter believe that the world is dark. Part 1 of this season's recap ends there. Thank you for watching the video. If you want to see the full recap of this masterpiece season, make sure to hit the subscribe button along with the bell icon for the latest updates. See you all in the next video.